Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Joey Yao. I am the director of the Central Lakes Community Performing Arts Center, and I'm honored to also be the coordinator of the Cultural Thursday program. I'm also honored to introduce our presenters today. We have with us today Buford Johnson, a veteran, a former CLC instructor, and a member of the Gordon Rosenmeyer Center for State and Local Government Board of Directors, as well as Adam Rees, the former president of Essentia Health in the Brainerd Lakes area, who has spent 32 years in healthcare, many of those years at the Mayo Clinic, and is also a member of the CLC Jazz Orchestra. Buford and Adam are here today to discuss the work of the Rotary Club and Sustainable Cambodia, which works with the families of rural Cambodian villages to help them achieve sustainability and self-sufficiency through wells, irrigation systems, schools, training, and empowerment. And before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the faculty and staff of Central Lakes College for supporting this program, as well as those of you who made the trek out today in the very cold temperatures to attend. If you have friends or family who could not attend, this program is being recorded and will be released on the Central Lakes College YouTube page sometime early next week. I'd also like to thank the Region 5 Development Commission for their support of this program. There will be a time for questions during the program. Since we are recording, if you have a question, after you are acknowledged, if you could just wait a moment for me to hand you a microphone to speak into. That way, people who listen to the recording will be able to hear your question more clearly, and it will just make everything come together a little bit nicer. So if you can pause for just a moment until I reach you, that would be perfect. Thank you. We also have a number of events that are happening this month. January is fairly packed, so I'd like to invite you to some of the things that the Performing Arts Center is doing. Tonight and tomorrow, we will have comedian C. Willie Miles here on the Chalberg stage at 7 p.m. Next Friday, we will have 3 of the most incredible up-and-coming Minnesota singer-songwriters who will be performing in our annual Songwriters in the Round concert, also here in Chalberg. And then January 23rd through 25th, we have this really fantastic production that is the work of several different people here in the college, including the Office of Equity and the Office of Equity and Inclusion, the Region 5 Development Commission, the Five Wings Arts Council, Essentia Health, the Lakes Area Justice Table, and Crow Wing Energized are all working to bring out the show Connect Effect, which is this immersive entertainment experience that involves an audience coming together to connect with one another, build empathy, generate interpersonal skills, and kind of generate a sense of joy around community. It's a really impactful event led by a 2-time Emmy-nominated producer, Rees. We're really excited for that. That will be January 23rd through 25th with evening sessions at 6 p.m. It is free. I encourage you all to consider coming out. You can find out more about that show and the rest in the lobby, as well as if you want to stop by the box office and speak to our box office assistant. And with that, and without further ado, thank you again for coming, and please join me in welcoming Buford and Adam.
It's a great privilege for me to be here to talk to you about the most exciting and the happiest and the poorest people on the globe. And how can they be so happy and so poor? I'd like to go into a little bit of history of Cambodia, and just to get a perspective of what Cambodia is like. If you look at Minnesota, if you took the 3 counties off the bottom of Minnesota, that's about the size of Cambodia. And they're broken down into 25 provinces, present government, and we have 87 counties, so the province and the county coincide.
Buford, can I just pause for 1 second? Can everyone hear Buford? No, is your mic on? It is on.
It is
Can
on.
we just move it up? I can pin it up, or.
Okay.
I'll do it. There we go. Let's try that.
No.
How's that?
Is it better?
Better? Okay.
Okay, great. Trying to remember where I was at now.
No, you were saying they're happy even though they're poor.
And very poor. But at one time, the Khmer, which is their culture and their language, actually originated out of India. And they were where they were Hindu. And they migrated into the central area. And let me hit the next spot here. migrated into what we'd call now Indochina area and part of Thailand. And by the year 900, they were pretty well established. By the 1200s, they were building Angkor Wat, which is, I don't know if you've heard about it in history, but it's a major temple, a Hindu temple that was eventually turned into a Buddhist temple. And the religion in Cambodia is Buddhist, but it's a strange form of Buddhism. It's a very mix of Hinduism and Buddhism, but they're very spiritual, and they take their religion very seriously. And historically, if you were a young man and wanted an education, you went to a Buddhist monastery to study to be a Buddhist monk. Didn't mean you were going to stay there, but that's where you got your training. You learned how to read and write and got your education. You'll see pictures of it later on. It's the same way today. But that's been going on for centuries. They've developed quite a beautiful culture. And then what happened? Well, the Vietnamese came in. Vietnamese moved down from China, moved into this area here, and cut off a part of what we call Cambodia today. So Cambodia lost a chunk of land. Then they started having trouble from the Thais and pushed the land up to this area here. And so they ended up kind of surrounded. But they had a king. And that's how they operated for years. Then in about 1858, somewhere around there, the Cambodians made the mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake, to invite the French in to help protect them. And the French did a pretty good job. They took over the country along with Laos and Vietnam. So for about 90 years, you had the French development in the Cambodian area and the Vietnamese area. And after the war, the French came back and they kicked them out. Vietnamese kicked them out. And then things went to hell from there. Things got even worse. Sihanouk was a king in Cambodia. Those old people, are there anybody here old enough to remember pre-Vietnam War, other than myself? Sihanouk wanted to be neutral. And the concept of neutrality is we don't want to fight with anybody. That's part of their religious system and their religious belief. Today they are a constitutional monarchy, but in their constitution it demands that they be neutral. They don't like conflict. Well, that's all they've seen is conflict for the last 50 years. And anyway, what I want to get to on this is they've had some pretty tough times. The communists from North Vietnam moved into Cambodia along the whole border and into Laos, which is the northern part of, touches the northern part of Cambodia. So the North Vietnamese were moving troops through that whole Vietnam War era. And Pol Pot was moving troops to the whole area. The difference between the troops from Vietnam and Pol Pot, he was a Cambodian, is their background. Ho Chi Minh was educated by Stalin. He was a good friend of Joseph Stalin's, sat in the Politburo of the Soviet Union. So he was a Soviet communist. Pol Pot was a Chinese, mostly Tung communist. And if you don't, maybe you don't recall, but there was a tremendous split between Russia and China. And the Soviet Union had a vested interest in Vietnam, with their good friend in Ho Chi Minh, to build a strong ally on the flank of China for their own protection. And for a while, the Pol Pot group and the North Vietnamese got along fairly well in their underground operation and development. When the war ended in Vietnam in 65, or 75, actually 72 we pulled out, and in 72 we cut off all supplies going to South Vietnam. So the South Vietnamese were left without weapons, ammunition, repair parts. And the Cambodians had a military force that was pro-Cambodian that had been receiving help from the United States prior to this in helping fight the communists. And we also cut them off. And when we cut off the Cambodian military force, Pol Pot was able to move quickly and took over the country. And that gets to the bizarre part of what happened in this whole system. What we're going to be talking about in the program is about a particular province where we're very active.
Can I just add something? Buford, Buford's giving us this historical perspective before we jump into the Prasat province, where we're doing this mission work through Sustainable Cambodia. But we thought this was very important to learn a bit about the history, especially what he's about to share with you. So what we'll do is when he's sort of wrapping up, we're going to pause and have anyone who has any questions about the historical perspective have Buford address those, and then we'll move to the present.
What we have coming up is something that's hard to believe, worse than Germany's destruction of the Jewish population. When Pol Pot took over, wait, thought I hit the right button here.
There you go.
Pol Pot took over, like Mo Zedong in China. If they didn't like you, you were done. How many people here wear glasses? That would be an excuse to exterminate you. They went into first they went into the major cities and moved everybody out. They wanted an agrarian society. And in moving everybody out, there wasn't enough to eat when they were moved out. So they figure about 1 million people starved to death. But the executions then began. And I'll go through several slides on this and just to give you an idea of how horrible it was. But you had one killing field. Okay, go back.
Share that slogan. This was a popular slogan. If you click the other side of the.
Yeah, I got it.
There it is, right there. Yeah.
Oh, it's better to arrest 10 people by mistake than to let one guilty person go free. It's kind of a reverse of what we try to say. You're innocent until proven guilty. But the massacres were extensive. The torture was extensive. It was an idea to destroy the whole economy and to make sure that we had nothing but people that could work in agriculture survive. So it's kind of a gory part of the history of Cambodia. I'm not going to say much about this except that when you get to Cambodia, if you ever go, you will see the killing fields that go there as a tourist destination. But the inhumanity of man is unbelievable. And this came out of Cambodians that, Pol Pot was Cambodian.
So they don't want future populations to deny the atrocities. So they have these very important museums, and they have all the skulls there. You can see exactly what happened, and it's absolutely horrifying. And maybe I just add, Buford, that when you start the trip, if anyone is interested, we're happy to share more information through Rotary International. But they want us to start at the killing fields and really understand that history. The good news is once you get beyond that part of the mission work, things are much more positive. But to recognize this actually took place in 75 to 80. I'm a little bit younger than this gentleman, so I was actually in high school at the time, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I never heard anything about the genocide that was going on. Did other people know about this genocide, this mass genocide? Okay, so some did, but a number of us we just didn't know. But
on the next slide, I hope I can get it up. Yeah, gives you an idea. These are the museums and things that cover the era from 75 to 80. And the tree, Adam, can you talk about?
Yeah, I'll talk about the tree. So he's going to click back a couple of slides, but
Find out what happened here.
oops.
I've been told that when it comes to electronics, just to be careful. I can touch a computer and put it out of operation. I should be working for the CIA to destroy things.
There we go. I can find it. So yeah, one comment here is just going to back up a couple of slides. Back to the killing fields. Oops, too forward. This, by the way, is the high school. This is a picture I took through. They literally just took a high school and turned it into a torture chamber area. But the picture that Buford's referring to is this one, and I don't know if you can see this on the, I guess it's your left. But we were going through the killing fields, and we're wearing these. We're wearing these headsets, and we had the English version, but there were lots of people from different countries, so different languages. And just as I'm listening, I'm at this point, and I'm listening to this what happened at this tree. These two young children were hanging out, and it was a strange experience. So this tree was this particular tree when the folks moved in after Pol Pot was disposed and all that. They found brain matter stuck to the bark of the tree, and they thought, "What is going on here? This is so strange." And so they tracked down some of the young prison guards who were running this particular camp, and they explained that they didn't want to use bullets unnecessarily because they had so many people to kill, and they would take the moms and the babies would come up to this area. They would separate the moms and the babies, and the babies they would literally just take by the feet and whack their heads against the side of that tree. And then there's a big pit where they would then kill the moms and toss the moms. So this area is, my wife and I, we almost felt like shell-shocked when we had finished that day of all of this stuff, and then to think it happened in 75 to 80. It just absolutely amazing. So anyhow, that's what we wanted to share with you there.
So in the process of all this extermination and rebuilding of Cambodia to make it an agricultural society, Pol Pot was defeated by the North Vietnamese, or by the Vietnamese, and they got into a battle among themselves. And then the Vietnamese kind of ruled Cambodia for about 10 years, and then finally the Vietnamese left Cambodia, and United Nations came in to help Cambodia get started with a new government. And that's how they ended up right now with a constitutional monarchy. But historically, it's kind of taken over by the military. They have one political party. They have several political parties. One political party that can stay in power, the Cambodian People's Party. And the son of the previous prime minister just took over as prime minister, so it looks like it's going to get lineage. But they also have a king, and they operate that way. But financially, the country is in pretty bad straits. The primary export for exporting today is we call it cloth. It's
Rice?
it's clothing.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is the labor is so cheap. So the companies are coming in and building factories for producing clothing. Other than that, they don't have much in resources.
Can I just make a comment here? So when I put this slide together, this is 2017 data, and what this shows is if you take the gross national product of a country and divide it by the number of people, you end up with a ratio, and that way they can compare country to country. And so, the average gross national product throughout the world is in the 17,000 range. But just for comparison, the U.S. is 60,000. You know, Singapore is near the top of the list, so I can't read the number from here. Maybe you can, but it's a higher number. But we're one of the very wealthy countries, and Cambodia, you can see, is actually about 1,400 per person. So it's right down there with some of the other poorest countries, Cameroon, you know, Papua New Guinea, African areas. This is an area that really was completely devastated. And again, if you think about it, when you have this kind of mass genocide and you're killing all the business people, all the intellectuals, the college professors, they killed all the religious leaders, so they were killed. I mean, it was just one after another. To rebuild a country from that situation, it's just unbelievable.
Well, to add to that, the population structure, over 76% of the population is under 40 years of age. So they don't have to worry about nursing homes at this point in time. They have what is, if I look at my figures right, 60 and over, 60%. No, 6%. So the older generation is gone. And it's the younger generation, those that are in their 30s, that have to put this country back together. And it creates a little bit of a problem. It takes some training and some experience. But they're coming along quite well. The structure in Cambodia is pretty much an ethnic group. They have some minorities. They have some Vietnamese, the Chinese, and when they say others, they have the Hmong and the Mountain Yard up in the highland area along the Vietnamese border and up into Laos. And I worked in the northern part up between Laos and Cambodia with a Rode tribe when I was in the service. Spent some time with them, and they're quite different altogether. But they have a couple major cities. The capital has got a little over 1 million people. That's the largest cities. Other than that, it breaks down in some lower populated cities, but the basic population lives in villages. And that's an interesting comment. A Cambodian village is more like a township. Everybody has a piece of property and land and kind of spread out. They'll have a market. Usually they'll have a Buddhist temple. And they kind of commingle to get to know each other. They know how to celebrate when the harvest season is ripe. They love a good marriage. The marriage in Cambodia usually lasts about 3 days. And families get together. And the kids go off on their own. They build a pretty good house. And from what I understand, the youngest in the family, the youngest, I don't know if it was the daughter or the youngest son, stays to live with the parents so that they can take care of them when the parents are older. That's an interesting way. You know, it's cohesiveness. But like I say, they're very, very religious in terms of really have a solid belief in Buddhism. And the temple is an important place for them. And the monks are really sacred. You don't want to touch one. And your kids, your sons, if possible, they're going to go join a Buddhist monastery to get some training and education. They may not live there all their life. They can leave when they want, but that's the structure. And from that, let's go on.
So we'll fast forward to the present, but before we do, are there any questions about the past? Oh, yes, ma'am? Oh, and I think Joey's going to get you a, we want to try to capture the question, if at all possible, on the recording here.
You were talking about the killing fields. I heard about it at the end of the 80s. Wasn't there a movie, Acropolis or something like that? That it was that from the 70s there was a war that the United States was under a secret. It was like a secret. They were undercover. Some of the soldiers were undercover in that movie, and they went in there, and it was still the killing fields. I don't know if there was a movie called The Killing Fields or the documentary that was at the end of the 80s too, that they put together. So yeah, I heard about it back then. I don't know, was Martin Sheen that was in the movie, but
Yeah, so
Douglas or something like that.
I don't know if someone else remembers the name of the movie that you're referencing. There are a couple of movies out there. Yeah. But the question, I think, your question was more about the U.S. involvement in Cambodia.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the question.
Yeah. There was some, she's asking about the U.S. military in Cambodia during the time, sometime during the war, right? Some secret missions.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, yes, in fact, I ended up in Cambodia a couple times. But that's where the North Vietnamese were organizing, and we bombed the living hell out of Cambodia. So they're having problems with that to this day. That the mines on the Thai side were put in by Pol Pot, the human landmines. And what we did is we bombed the jungle, and a lot of the ordnance didn't go off. So kids are still having trouble with finding things they pick up and explodes on them. So that's a problem today.
But wasn't that was a big issue because we were supposedly allies, right, with the Cambodians?
No, Cambodia was trying to be neutral.
Right.
And after Sihanouk, I guess, was ousted and the military took over, they worked with us a little bit. Yes, they did. And they were depending on us, and that's what happened in the 70s when we pulled out of Vietnam. We cut the Cambodian military off of any military support. And so they had no way to defend themselves against Pol Pot. We did the same thing to the South Vietnamese. When we left in 72, we cut them off of all supplies, ammunition, and the like. So when the North Vietnamese were rebuilt by the Soviet Union, it took them 3 years, I think.
So there's a lot of past sins from.
What's that?
There's some past sins from us and others as well.
So it's not a clear. And someday they're going to write the history of this and get all the facts. I don't have all the facts, and I don't think I've read a book that seems to have all the facts.
So we're going to move. I think we should move forward. And I appreciate. Yeah. And we're happy to explore this maybe a bit further after the rest of the, but it's a good question. And I just want to make a comment right here that, you know, when you think about all that's done, because the French actually stole a lot of their artifacts and they did some things that the Cambodians weren't thrilled about either. And the Vietnamese came in and did their attacking, and it just goes on. And then there's other further historical issues too, but then Pol Pot was Cambodian, and then he did the mass genocide. Where the people are today is they hold no grudges whatsoever. They are going forward, and if you're there to kind of help them and support them, then they're so as Americans, we were completely welcomed. They still have lots of arrangements with the French. On the medical side, the French are doing lots of things. There's all sorts of countries that are helping Cambodia. So good question, thank you. Yes, sir.
Well,
One quick question. In the genocide,
Was that an ethnic cleansing? Is there more than one ethnic group? Or was just people with disabilities, say if you couldn't see or if you had some other disability? So is their ethnicity, is it all similar? Are they
it
Khmer?
had nothing to do with it has nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that you were educated, that you weren't a farmer, that you wore glasses, that you could speak 2 languages, that you were in business. I mean, it was a total cleansing, not only of the adults. They had to go after the children. They said, we have to, you know, and that was because you destroy the grass, you have to kill the roots too. or kill the weeds, you got to kill the roots. It was a massive extinction of human beings, unless
they
they were
killed, right, about a
unless
third
they were
of,
farmers.
no, a quarter of the population, right?
Yeah,
Buford?
part of the population.
So 2.5 million
And
people.
quite a few people fled. But today, if you talk to people from Cambodia, they fear not the future, weep not for the past. They live for today and tomorrow. They're the happiest people you ever wanted to meet. I mean, I look at their history and my God, you know, it's horrible, and they come out of it. I gave you the book on No Man is Born Poor.
Yeah.
A fellow whose parents he watched be executed. They were business people in a village, and he was made a slave as a kid to work the rice fields until he was damn near ready to starve to death. And he escaped into Thailand, got out, and ended up in New Zealand, came back and became an official of in the Cambodian new government. And he gets a call from Pol Pot, second in command. They were trying to rush his house, and he needed help. And he went out to help him. And he knew the individual who was involved in the killing of his own family. But he said, "I'm Khmer. That's what I do." And by the way, when the war ended with Pol Pot finished out his life in Cambodia alive. I mean, it was a forgiveness type thing. It's a part of their Buddhist belief. So it's a fantastic story of you know, I think, how to be happy. Don't carry a grudge. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. So the good news is when you go forward, that's where the hope is. The hope isn't in the past, the hope is in the future. And so, you know, the reality is that there's still large numbers of people who don't have any water. When this whole thing started, there was an attorney in Florida, Bruce Lasky, and his mom. They started this school, and then they ran into some problems. And so Richard Allen, who's with Rotary in Orlando, he's the one in '04 and '05 who said, well, maybe we can use some of the principles that we're learning around the world on how to do sustainability and improvement, and that kind of birthed this sustainable Cambodia. And one of the first things they did then was they actually started a local Rotary club. And Buford, I've learned so much from you over the years, but share with this group why Rotary International is one of the most effective international aid organizations in the world.
Well, I've heard this from the leader of the World Health Organization at a conference I was at. But Rotary is not the largest nonprofit organization, but the most effective. And the reason for that is we don't give handouts. We help organize a Rotary group in the area we're going to help if they want the help. The local group knows what the problems are and what areas. And we try to work through the local Rotary in that country and find out what the people want, what they need, and work with them to develop their own schools to help with them. We want the people that are getting the help doing the work. We don't come in and give out handouts. And that makes a big difference because some people come in, they have all this stuff to give away, and then they leave. And what you've done is maintain poverty. You solve the short-term solution, but they need more. They need to take care of themselves. But Rotary's, and it's well known worldwide. I got involved with Rotary when I was asked to join several times. I said, no, it's no man's club. I was in Jordan giving a presentation, and when the presentation was over, I was congratulating the Jordanians for keeping the peace with Israel. I was with a group of retired military and religious leaders that thought probably war is too damn important to be left to politicians. And war is the ultimate insanity. That's all I can say about it. And so this gentleman came up and said, well, General so-and-so, I forget his name now. He said, I'm the one who wrote the Accords. He said, the reason they work is they're based on the Rotary principles. And I said, what? And he explained it to me. Then he took me around, showed me what Rotary was doing in Jordan, and they were doing a lot of work in Jordan. I mean, with the help, they were able to put together what I'd call a nursing home, but it was all done with volunteers from Jordan. And I came back to the States, and I contacted Rick Bricker. He used to have the cleaners here in town. He passed away since. And I said, Rick, I'm ready to join Rotary, and I know the job I want. So in the Rotary program at the local Brainerd Club, I'm the foundation chair for the International Foundation. So I help raise money to help Rotary out. But that's so much for Rotary.
Yeah, enough of
that's
Rotary.
my sales
But
pitch.
now, so the idea then is you want local leaders involved. So early on was create a local Rotary club. And if you notice, there's not one American or German or French or anyone else. These are all Cambodians. We've met them on a few occasions. And so they know what's best for the Prasad province and how to move forward. And so you combine that with some international knowledge and some financial support and other support. And this whole Sustainable Cambodia was launched again. And the two themes in the launch are community development and education. And again, it's all about trying to create local empowerment. So you're gonna get a strong theme of that, not only at the Rotary Club, but in every manner in which the villages these challenges are addressed. But you'll see a photo in just a moment of one of these village development teams. But underneath if we sort of look into this community development, not all the villages are going to have exactly the same interventions, but they'll have common themes, and they're offered the full spectrum. If they wanted all of that, that would be certainly an option. But they learned early on in order to get kids to go to school, you can't have them carrying water for hours a day and also being sick, because the water that they use is the same water that they bathe in, the animals use, it's their latrine, it's everything. And so it's not safe water to drink. So safe water becomes a really important theme. Sanitation and hygiene is really important as well. So you'll see some bathrooms. But another opportunity is agriculture. So it's predominantly in the Prasad area is rice. You'll see rice fields everywhere, and so trying to diversify the crops, bring in more protein sources, so animal programs and that sort of thing as well is a part of all of this. On the education side, the challenge was that there's very, very high rates of illiteracy. And remember, part of the Pol Pot genocide program was to eliminate educators. So if anyone in this room is an educator, you would have been killed by the genocide group. So rebuilding that whole infrastructure of the schools starts with some kind of primary education. They eventually added in the preschools. We'll share more about that. But if you have kids coming to school hungry, then you need to look at some kind of food element. All the way through, Sustainable Cambodia does have a program for university scholarships. And just, I know some of you have been to Cambodia and are very aware of this, and we'll show you some pictures in a moment. But to sponsor a child for education is really modest. And I always forget the number. Diane, is it like $200, $300 or something like that? $300 for a year. That actually includes a supplement for their village as well. And the university, I think it's up to about $500 or so at the university level. So American support goes a long way in helping these villages. This is one of the really cool things. So part of the learning was, in order for a village to be selected to be a part of the Sustainable Cambodia, they have to want to participate. So nothing is being forced on anyone. But then there's some conditions, and one of the conditions is we need a village development group, And this is an example of one. And if you were to go over on one of those trips, you would actually spend some time meeting some people in the village development group. The local leader, and I don't know who it is in this picture, I will show you some pictures of them in just a moment, but then there's men and women, and the children are hanging out because it's where do the children go? So why don't we just drag them along to the meeting as well? But you have this real local sense of buy-in because they're a part of selecting, this is what we want. We want this kind of well, we want this purification system or whatever. And they also put some skin in the game. There's a modest amount, right, Buford,
Yeah.
of money that they put into it as well, and a bit of sweat equity. A lot of this, though, is coming from the Sustainable Cambodia folks, but even if it's a modest amount, it creates that buy-in, and this is ours, and we want to take care of it, and so on and so forth. This is an example of a rooftop rain system. And I don't know if we have time probably to get into it, but if people are interested, we can talk about it later. But they have this rainy season where they get deluged by rain, and then they have a dry season. And so if you can capture the rain, in this case from this roof water system, and store them in these large containers, you'll have a tremendous amount of water to use then throughout the dry season. And then the water purification system, and I don't think I have a slide of how that is designed, but it came out of Canada and I think some international organization. But they're making things locally. So these are actually built locally. Buford, you actually helped.
Yeah.
You volunteered to help build one of these, is that right?
I did.
So it's cement, and it's using local things, and then the water purification has to do with like sand and rock, and it's some kind of biofilter. I'm not smart enough to know. I'm sure there's some college professor here that would understand the details of it. But what's so cool is for a modest amount of money, you can make clean water in these communities. Then the Animal Pass-On Program. Again, Rotary likes to take good ideas from other organizations. And so a number of you are probably familiar with the heifer program, but if you bring over and a family gets an animal, then when it gets two animals, then when they have an offspring, there's a contract written. And so that the offspring has to go to other villagers before you can start keeping the offspring. So they have a way of kind of spreading these assets throughout the village. Pictures of the agricultural side. This is the part that most of us find the most uplifting, is just hanging out with the kids. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. This is some pictures from the preschool program that they have there. The meals, this was really interesting. So Buford and Diane, feel free to share, but my understanding is that the food part of this is some local volunteers, right? Yeah. And then you'll see a picture later on, the kids actually help clean up. The SC schools, the idea is to have the government run the educational program, and they do in large part, but in some of these villages there may not be something. So Sustainable Cambodia comes in, they build the school, but the idea is once you get it up and running and going, you want to turn it back over to the government and let them run it.
What happens is if a village wants a school and they apply for one from the government, normally it takes about 12 years for the government to finance it. So if they can get it started, what we do, the government will come in 5 years and fund a school. And what the government does is gives Rotary 2 classrooms in the school. And the classrooms are responsible for helping the science, which includes computer use, and the learning of English. And the reason we want them to learn English is because they can't go to college unless they have an English-speaking capability. So Rotary is involved with the state schools with 2 classrooms. But it sure takes a lot of burden off of Rotary in terms of the cost of having a school. Because helping them build a school and have them operate the school is not inexpensive.
Then there's the libraries, and so one of the volunteer activities is just hanging out in the libraries with the kids and reading to them, and they're reading to you and playing games. This is something, though, that's really interesting. These are the community, these are the enrichment schools, and this is a little bit different. And in this country, I don't think, at least I'm not aware of this sort of thing. When you think about how does somebody get to college, they go through our grade school system and high school and then college. And in a lot of these Asian countries, you can't get into college if you graduate from high school. You will not be able to pass the entrance exams. And so there are these after-school programs. We had a Thai gal living with us through a Rotary exchange program, and she loved the year she spent here at Brainerd High because it was so easy. Because where she went to high school, then she went to after school high school, more classes, and then and that was 5 days a week, but then they also went to another class on Saturday as well. So anyhow, so Rotary, the problem is that all costs money, and that means that people of means have an opportunity to go to college, but not these villagers. So what they've done here is they've created these after-school programs for the villagers. So the villagers can attend, they can get, they do very well competitively, the village students, and then there's the scholarship program if they want to go on to college. And so here's an example of the computer classes at the enrichment level. So these are the after-school programs. Another challenge they ran into was that some of the kids in the rural villages, it took too long for them to get to school and get back. Part of that was solved through a bicycle program. We'll show you the bikes in a moment. But in this case, for some of the girls, it wasn't always very safe for them to be walking long distances on dark roads at night. And so they created this girls' dormitory, and these are some of the gals in the dormitory. Then they have a youth club. So what they're doing with the Rotary and the local leaders in the community, they're also doing at the student level as well. So it's kind of a modeled program. Again, if you go on one of the mission trips, you'll hear presentations from these local youth groups, and it is so encouraging. These young people are absolutely awesome. They have great ideas. They're doing wonderful things in the community to better the broader community. At this point, I changed it on this slide. Interesting. We're still debating whether it's 500 or 450, but needless to say, there's hundreds of students from these villages where the average person was not educated at all, now have gone through all the way through high school and have graduated with a 4-year degree. So even in just 20 years or so, there's been just tremendous progress made. And I think that's where the hope comes. So we hope we don't leave you with thoughts about the genocide, but it's more on this side of the equation that we want to leave you with. We don't have time to get into this, but this is the Days for All Girls program. And again, it's so interesting. At least I don't have any concept of this, but there's sanitation and women's health issues. Just they're in a different situation. And Diane, I think you were just sharing with me before this meeting that if a woman, or in this case the girls, the students, are menstruating, they have to go to a hut somewhere and spend a week away, and so they couldn't go to school. And so the idea was to create these reusable bags you can see here with the women's products, so that they can then take care of those sorts of things and be a part of school or whatever else they want to be involved in. So that's another program. These are just a few pictures of if any of you were interested in participating. You start off in Phnom Penh, the capital, the big city. And these were just some, this is the kind of bus that we use to travel around in. So it's actually, it's not luxurious, but it's certainly comfortable. And then we spend a couple of days there primarily to get a sense of the killing fields and what the atrocities occurred. And then we move into the village, Persat, and this province, it's actually a province with a bunch of rural villages, has a small little city in it, but the official census numbers are in the 420 to 430,000 range. But when you talk to the local leaders, they say those census numbers aren't accurate because there's a lot of men who are traveling to Thailand and elsewhere. They do this farm labor to try to bring back enough money when things aren't going well at home. So I think the total population is maybe 500,000. But these are the kinds of places where the village people live, and the supermarkets are interesting. The market areas are just, the raw food is just out there. And so I will say it is pretty odoriferous when you walk around. They had fish delivered, so they literally just took the bags of live fish and were straightening them out, and lots of nice, beautiful produce as well. One of the big themes here, though, in the Persat schools was to try to support the local culture that had been decimated during Pol Pot's regime. And so the students really enjoyed the classes in Khmer, the costumes, the traditional dances, all of that. That's a very important part. And as a visitor, it is such a joy to see. More pictures of schools, and a number of these photos I personally took. Some of these also Buford and Diane took, and there were a few others I got from some other sources. My son was here. I'll tell you, if you're a young man, but the girls were going up to my wife saying, your son is so handsome. There was a whole gaggle of these beautiful girls walking around with him. Anyhow, if you drive around, if you have the ability to not walk, it's usually the mode of transportation are these motorbikes, and you can take a family of 4, you can put chickens on the back, you name it. There's, and let's see, moving on here, this is examples of the farm program, the cows that are here. You can see the rice. These are the sacks of rice. This, by the way, is when it's during the dry season, they can actually lay the rice out. Before they've removed the husk of the rice, they can just dry them on these tarps. And so you'll see even on roads, they'll stop a road that isn't being used all that often, and they'll just lay out all these rice to dry. But then they get packaged. One of the interesting things is that the roads, you're going to see some very nice roads. It's relatively recent, but the Chinese have been investing, I don't know, how much money do you think they've been investing in Cambodia? $1 billion or more?
Oh, yeah, well over.
Tremendous amounts. And so there's beautiful new roads, so it's much easier to move around than it was before. But one of the interesting things is that all the roads basically lead to China, and so all of these fruits and vegetables, and especially the rice, those sorts of things, they go to China for being processed, and then they're sold back to the Cambodians for large amounts of money. And so they don't have the ability to do some of that basic middleman kind of wealth production, and that's keeping them a bit impoverished. And so I'm hoping at some point that there'll be more economic mission work. How do you help support them so that they can do their own processing of food and so on and so forth, and don't have to buy it back at a high markup? Again, just going to skim through the last couple of pictures here, and then we want to pause for more questions and answers. You'll notice that many of the pictures don't have older folks. This is an example of an older person, and this was a granddaughter here in one of the villages we were visiting, and this was her grandma. But it is odd when you go into the villages and you just expect to see more age diversity, and you're looking at a lot of young people. The average age is 26 years old. So it's a very young population. And this is a typical home that you would see as well. Again, more of the water purification. This, by the way, this is you pour in the water from one of these large holding tanks, and it goes through the biofilter with the sand and the rocks, and out comes the clean water at the back end. And they make that right at the Sustainable Cambodia School in Persat. Buford talked about the importance of their faith, which was very evident. And if you visit other countries like Thailand, you'll see just unbelievably beautiful, lavish temples. Here, they've had to rebuild a lot, and they don't have the same sorts of investment. But this was a nice place. Buford mentioned and I believe these are your pictures or Diane's pictures of the marriage ceremony. But that is a big deal, is the marriages there. And the women have multiple clothes they change, and so on and so forth. I did speak to a younger Thai leader, it was Wichita, and he told me what he didn't like about the old culture was this was so expensive. So for them, they're paying off this wedding for 10 years or something like that. But anyhow, that's the culture. And let's see here. Then after you spend the majority of the trip in Persat, where all that work is taking place, you end up finishing the trip in Siem Reap, which is one of the other major cities. I'm not sure the exact population, but this is home of one of the 7 wonders of the world. And so most people who are familiar or have done a trip to Cambodia go to Siem Reap, and they go to see Angkor Wat, which is the largest Buddhist, actually maybe the largest even religious building in the world. It's just absolutely enormous, the scale of this. And I think you had mentioned it was 1100 AD?
Around 1100.
Around 1100, somewhere in that range. But no one, they thought this was just a myth for a long time because they didn't know where it was. And so sometime during the French occupation, and so I don't know if that was the 1800s exactly, but they discovered Angkor Wat just completely covered with, the jungle basically took it all over. And so when you look at some of the neighboring temples, you'll see they've left all the roots, and the trees are just a part of it. And so I thought I was on a set for Indiana Jones or something like that. And apparently some of the Hollywood films have been filmed in these areas. You'll see monkeys running around as well. They end the program with this opportunity to visit this Apapo, or I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's basically hero rats. And this sort of is a fitting way to talk about something awful that had happened in the past when Pol Pot put all these landmines because he didn't want Cambodians escaping. You had the Vietnamese, and there was landmines from their attacks. The Americans had leftover dropped bombs. This is an example of one of those. And you have farmers and kids, and especially the kids, they don't know where they shouldn't be playing. And so there's been this ongoing maiming of people, and in some cases deaths. And so, and this map here, right here, shows a lot of the concentrated areas of where these unexploded mines are. And so the old way was to actually use an electronic mine sweep, and then somebody, and I can't remember which country it was, but it was in Europe, learned that this giant African rat has an ability to smell that is unbelievably amazing. And that we can train the rats, and they take an area about the size of a tennis court, and they have a tether that goes back and forth. And the rats go back and forth and sweep the land. And they have removed, thousands of these mines through this technique. And so that's sort of a neat thing, and you can sponsor a rat. I don't know about you, but I've always hated rats. In fact, I'm born on the year of the rat. When I go to the Chinese place and they have the little thing, I always thought, I don't want to be born in 1960 because I'm the year they got rat. I love rats now. and some of the Cambodians we spoke to who used to eat rats, they said, I won't eat the rat anymore because they're our heroes. But they're just saving lives. They're just amazing. They're just wonderful. And then there's examples of lots of materials that people bring over and so on and so forth. And here's Buford and Diane. And I had a picture of, oh yeah, these are the kids you're sponsoring, is that right? Yeah. So anyhow, that's great opportunities. And again, if people are interested, we can share that. You can see the bicycles, though. The bicycles are amazingly important to help people get the students to get to school and back.
Well, the big thing about the bikes, we don't just give them bikes. This is done, the parents are called in by the village chief, and they sign a statement saying that we understand these are to be used for educational purposes. And when a bicycle comes into town or into the school, usually it's not a bicycle and a person. Usually it's a bike and 3 or 4 people. But the bicycle becomes a great means of transportation because a good number of the kids can live 5 and 6 and 7 miles away from school. So how do you get there? Because the villages, like I said, are more like townships. The houses are spread out. They go quite a distance. So the bicycle for educational purposes becomes a vital means of transportation. We use school buses here.
So Buford, I'm just looking at the watch. I realize we're at the top of the hour. So I think, Joey, we're probably about done. But we'll stick around for questions. Do we have time for another question or two? Or?
Yes, I know it's 1 o'clock, and I know we have some students who may need to go. But if you need to leave, feel free to do so. If you would like, if you have a question before we wrap up, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'll be happy to bring it down. And if not, then you're welcome to speak with Adam and Buford after the presentation.
Thanks,
okay.
everyone.
Thank you so much.